on with the show. So our first speaker is Ronnie Baskin, Kilimanjaro's founder and CEO. It's my pleasure to welcome Ronnie, to officially welcome you and open our forum today. Ronnie's got some interesting stuff to talk about, and without further ado, Ronnie, over to you. Welcome.
Thanks, Grant, for that very generous and flattering introduction. Welcome to everybody that's attending the user groups today. Some of you this will be your first time. For some of you, it may even be your 14th time. I did a little bit of a count to see how many times we had done this, and we've actually done it for the last 14 years, initially in a slightly different format, and then as a roadshow. And from, I think, March 2020, when COVID hit, we switched to an online format, which has been particularly successful. One of those few things that translates well into online. We're going to be talking today about data-driven insights, and the various speakers will actually take you on a more technical journey. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to just frame the conversation by saying that what I'm going to talk about is why we actually measure, what you measure, how you decide what you're going to measure, and then selecting the right metrics, and also talk to you about the distortion that happens when you're selecting these metrics. And you should expect these distortions and not be surprised when they do happen. So I'll start off by answering the question, why do we measure? We measure because by setting benchmarks and challenges, we get this continuous improvement over time. And the best analogy that I can find, or that I like to use, is in sport. And if you look at the men's world outdoor mile record, you can see over a period of time, because the record is there, as human beings, we are competitive. We have an entrepreneurial spirit. You're always trying to do better than the day before, or the month before, or the year before. And you can see over time how this record has come down. Current record holder is somebody called Hicham El Jarouch, and the record was set in Rome in 1999, which is now a long time ago, 22 years ago, at 3 minutes 43.13. But one thing you can be sure of is that record will be broken at some point in the future, simply because the record is there and everybody is trying to do better than before. And very much the same in your own businesses. Now, MYOB recently put out a bit of research. Forrester's research organization was contracted by MYOB to look at businesses in the sort of verticals and places that you're in. And I found this statement in there, which I thought was quite telling, where it says that the wrong digital solution can have a negative effect. And I've extrapolated that a little bit. So I'm not talking here about the wrong digital solution. I'm talking about the wrong metric when you're actually measuring your performance. Again, to use the sports analogy, I'm saying that you can get dysfunctional consequences of performance measurements. So it's not only about selecting the right metric, but it's also about how you verify that. So if you look at something like golf, if you were to either stop measuring how many strokes it takes to get the little ball into the little hole, it becomes a bit of a meaningless game. So the other point is that not everything that matters can be measured. There are a lot of things that are very difficult to measure when you talk about things like organizational culture, organizational climate, employee engagement. These are very complex things to measure, but they certainly matter a lot in your organization. So over the years, I guess we've seen this in many companies, and come to the conclusion that choosing a metric that will not distort behavior is difficult, if not impossible. So as I said at the beginning, when you start measuring, you must anticipate and expect that you are going to get distortions in behavior. And I'll give you some illustrations of what I mean by that. There was a school of thought a few years back where people spoke about one metric that matters, and chose a single metric, and there was a feeling that you could run your entire business on a single metric. We know now that that's not correct. Even if you chose, in a competitive environment, you chose profitability as the metric, that wouldn't be correct, because you're probably looking at a combination of profitability and growth, or something else, which I'll talk about in a moment. So you can use the one metric that matters at lower levels in the organizations, in operational areas where it's very, very focused and directed. But again, you get these distortions. I'm going to use an example from a prior life when I was a dairy farmer, and I can remember as a young child walking into the milking shed and seeing the milkers sitting on their three-legged stools and milking the cows. And at that point, the metric that mattered was essentially volume. It was gallons. How many gallons of milk did you produce as a dairy farmer? How many gallons of milk did each cow produce? And that was it, because you got paid in cents per gallon. And the milk truck would arrive and take the milk away in these big 10-gallon galvanized milk cans, which you still see in antique shops and so on today. I'm not that old, but I can still remember this. What happened then is there was a realization that by keeping milk cool, you could reduce or slow down the rate of bacterial growth in milk. So you had things like these Maloney's milk cooler, which was a sort of a radiator. You ran the milk over cold water, and you then put it in the can. And that evolved to these bulk milk tanks when the dairies, the commercial dairies that you were supplying, brought in a second metric, which was temperature. And they said, right, we're not only going to pay you on gallons, but your milk needs to be delivered at a low temperature. Usually, I think it was 4 degrees centigrade. And that spurned a whole industry of people building these manufacturing these bulk milk tanks. And farmers were driven to now have two metrics that mattered. The one was gallons and the other one was temperature. And that wasn't enough. So as the technology evolved in terms of how you measured bacteria in terms of somatic cell count and total plate count, the remuneration you got for your milk became dependent on the bacteria count. And this led to a whole evolution of chemicals and cleaning products, so that your bulk milk tank and your milking machine equipment would be washed and cleaned and would keep your bacteria count low, so you weren't introducing bacteria. And so what happened, and when I talk about distorting behavior, this is probably the best example of distorted behavior that I know, is that the farmers realized that when you washed out this bulk milk tank, when you'd finished washing it, you didn't want to wash it out with water, because the water itself may contain bacteria. So you washed it out with an acid rinse. And if you left a little bit of the acid rinse in the bottom of the tank, that would inhibit the bacteria in the milk. So that then led to another metric being introduced, which was how many detergents or acid was in the milk. And this is what I'm talking about in terms of a single metric distorting behavior, and how you have to be aware that you probably start building up these metrics. What happened after that, once that had been sorted, the commercial dairy started bringing in other metrics, how much butterfat in the milk, how much protein in the milk. And what that did is it impacted on the breeding, not only the selection of breeds, but the breeding as well of your cattle, because both the production of butterfat and protein are highly heritable characteristics. So if you select a bull whose progeny are high in protein, you can increase the average protein in your herd, thus getting this incremental improvement over time. So the measurement leads to you chasing incremental improvement in whatever you're measuring. And this has become an entire genetic science of the selection of bulls to use, depending on what you're trying to improve in your herd, whether it's total volume of production, or whether it's protein, or whether it's butterfat. So that's just one simple illustration of how choosing the metric distorts behavior. And something to bear in mind in your own company: don't look for single metrics. You can have simple metrics in individual pockets of your organization, but as you move up through the hierarchy, your metrics do get into compound metrics. So as an example, if you're looking to increase revenue, you're going to measure revenue. If you're looking to reduce costs, you're going to be measuring your costs. If you're looking to improve your net promoter score, you're going to be measuring your net promoter score. And I guess looking at the structure in the organization, the hierarchy in the organization, I like to use a military analogy and say that the foot soldiers in the trenches need very different information to the generals that are back at headquarters planning the next battle. So at the bottom of the of this diagram I have of a simplified organizational chart, your team leaders, your operational managers, your area managers need operational reporting, your management needs analytical reporting, and your board of directors needs stakeholder reporting. And these are just things to bear in mind as we go through this morning's session and you're exposed to the tools you can use and the power that these ERP systems, particularly the system that you're on now, MYOB Advanced, to the power that these systems have to extract information and the power that the business intelligence tools have to interpret this information and give you these 3 levels of reporting, which allow you to get the incremental improvement in performance. So in summary, the way to do this is to, completely independent of your ERP system, understand what the critical success factors in your business the critical success factors in your business are. This is derived from your strategy. Identify your critical success factors. Decide what your indicators are of those factors. So what we call verifiable indicators. What are the yardsticks by which you're going to measure those? Then you identify the source of information, which is what we're talking about today. And then the final step is using that to leverage off that information to make these informed decisions. And ideally, if you can get your information in real time, you can make your decisions based on these data-driven insights in real time. So I think, Grant, that's it from me. And thank you very much again for giving me the opportunity to introduce myself to the user groups and to just give you an overall view of what we're going to be talking about today.